All right, so does everyone have, okay, so now we are officially recording. Great. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And another housekeeping note, I will be sending this PowerPoint presentation along with a link for all the resources. Of course, you want to go to the one that should not be. As well as the resources that we have available. So to start off, I just want to go over the purpose of this meeting. What is a performance outcome? How have we thought about it in the past? Who is this relevant for right now? And from there, we'll move into the timeline for the NOFA competition. After that, we'll talk a little bit about the performance evaluation process. What needed to improve? What did we need to update? Then what will be replacing that prior process? And then we'll go through some of the scoring rubric calculations as we are calculating them in HMIS. So we have the scoring rubric, right, that we've been talking through, but how are we calculating in HMIS and what types of clients are selected there? Then we'll get into a HMIS demonstration of these new tools. And from there, we'll wrap it up with, things to keep in mind, what's going to come next after this process wraps up, and then what are different resources that y'all can utilize. So this is here more as a reference. We are going to be using acronyms all throughout this presentation. Feel free to refer back to this. We also have a long list of acronyms in our Help Center. So that link will lead you there and you'll be able to review all the acronyms that we have available. All right, so let's set the ground. So I think most folks are familiar with the performance outcomes process being both a quarterly monitoring process and a review of their NOFA competition. It's always sort of been confusingly called the same thing. And so I want to make a differentiation between the quarterly process versus that of the NOFA competition. So the quarterly process is effectively using all the same kind of math and calculations that we use for the purpose of the NOFA competition. Somebody join us? All right. That we use for the purpose of the competition, but it applies to all project types. So it includes emergency shelters, transitional housing, street outreach, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing. It's effectively a monitoring for us across the system. So that goes out on a quarterly basis. You're used to having the data dive labs occur. And for the past quarter, we have not done it. So last time that we had done this quarterly process for both ESG and COC funded projects was in, I believe in March, or February or March sometime, where we were sending out that information to you all. We have not had one for Q2 yet, but we will for Q1 of 2021. But we will include that when we have our Q2 review coming up in July. So for now, we did skip a quarter for this quarterly monitoring process. And I'll say that this quarterly monitoring process, it's for monitoring. It's never been scored. And the performance evaluation tool is really only ever looking at the year-long process. There's no place where it's calculating, participation during the quarters of that particular year. So for today, what we're going to be talking about is more so related directly to the NOFA competition. And the NOFA competition is going to be for any projects that are renewing their contracts for PSH and RRH projects funded by the COC. So if you're funded by the COC for those project types, our performance evaluation tools are going to be measuring your performance and ranking you for that potential funding. And so the tools that we're showing you today are applicable to those project types, PSH and RRH. Now, YHDP, I know that we have some folks in YHDP. That competition has not opened up. There's not even a scoring tool yet developed for that. So I think we are in the process of developing that, and we'll be making that live eventually. But just know that this is more related to those PSH, RRH projects that are funded by COC dollars that are looking to get renewed. So the performance outcomes are made up of 14 different criteria. The 14 criteria are looking at housing stability, the maintenance or increase of non-employment income, employment income, mainstream non-cash benefits, the drawdown rate of your grant, of your contract, the quarterly drawdown rate, how many harder to serve clients you're working with, what is your rate of return to homelessness, what is your HMIS data quality, specifically completeness and timeliness. Then we look into racial equity as it relates to your board and staff members at your organization. And then wrapping it up is the length of time for housing. So a client that gets referred to you, how quickly can you house them in that time frame? How many different priority populations you're serving, and then the cost effectiveness of your permanent housing, whether it be PSH or RRH, and finally health insurance. How many of your clients have health insurance? So you may have seen some of these metrics. We've sent out the rubric. They look something like this, right? Where we have, if you look at this screen, and I have people waiting in the lobby. Gwen or Chris, could you? There we go. Thank you. All right. So when we look at these 14 different metrics, this is what it typically looked like. For the majority of these criteria, we're going to be, the raw data sort of results in a percentage, and we're going to be looking at these percentages and then assigning the points according to this rubric right here. If you look at the second to the right column, 97 to 100% is 20 points, etc. So we will be making that calculation and assigning points in that regard. And so just to talk through the columns here, we split it up by measuring through PSH and RRH. This is the source of the data. The second column here, we can see that it's from the APR, the stayers. The middle column, the third one right here, is the calculation itself, what we agreed is the calculation for the general criteria. The score distribution right over here based on the result of this calculation, and then the total weight of this particular criteria. And so we have built these new performance evaluation reports in HMIS, basing all of our calculations off of what is on the scoring rubric. And I want to make a note that right now, literally tomorrow, I believe that the non-conflicted scoring group is actually going to be voting on some minor edits that we had to make now that we're moving away from an older process that looked at APRs and SPMs. Now, since we are moving to this new tool, there were a couple of edits that are largely math error edits, right? We had to improve the math on some of these calculations. And also just to indicate that where this information is coming from, because it can no longer just be said that it's the APR. We want to be more descriptive in terms of that it's coming out of HMIS. Even though APR information does come out of HMIS, but I'll get into that point in a little bit. So who's this relevant to right now? So eventually it'll be relevant to everyone. These tools are going to be applicable across the board to multiple project types, depending on what kind of project type you are, right? If we're looking at housing stability, that metric's going to be different for a street outreach project rather than a PSH project. So depending on the project type, each of these columns, each of these criteria will be available, but the tools will be able to be used by everyone in the system. But for our purposes and the purpose of this meeting, this is really a kickoff to talk through the most important group, which are the PSH and RH projects that are funded through the COC. So this information, everything that we're going to be going over today are relating to those projects that are funded by the PSH, the PSH projects and RH projects that are funded through the COC. And unfortunately for this session, we are not going to be providing information and performance evaluation for ESG projects, which would include, emergency shelter, transitional housing, street outreach, but we are looking to roll that in the next quarter in July so that we can start capturing that full breadth of information all through HMIS. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline for the NOFA competition data cleanup. I like to call this the data cleanup process. Now we're going to introduce you to these new HMIS tools. Tomorrow, we're going to be posting the first round of results that we are literally going to export out of HMIS. We're going to put it onto a spreadsheet, add drawdown information, and that will be the spreadsheet that you'll send out to your, executive directors or people that may not necessarily use HMIS, but still need to review the scores. They will still have a sheet that they can go to. They do not need an HMIS login to see the results. And the next day, after that, we have a second round where, again, our team will go into HMIS, pull the latest results that we have posted, and then again, export that into another spreadsheet, round 2 results, and send that out to EDs, just the general community, so that they can review it and come back with any issues. And then finally, the process will wrap up on June 14th, which is when we will pull the final round of results. And this will be kind of set in stone. Whatever the results are as of June 14th will be how you are evaluated for your NOFA competition. So there's a pretty large breadth of time to be able to address this. But even though we have these different rounds, I want to make it clear that we're posting these every 2 weeks, but the new system, the new reports that are there, they can be updated literally day of. They're active, they're live. So if you make changes to, if you notice that you had a bunch of clients that never had their veteran question completed, and you go back to fix those particular clients because, 1 or 2 was missing from your priority population, your score will change once you make that fix in the system. And you will be able to review that change and see that change live. So even though we have these 3 disparate round dates, you as HMIS user, you will be able to review all that information live, day of. So let's talk about what this performance evaluation process had been and what it will be. So previously, this process was very manual. I think some of y'all may have already been involved with this, but it was time intensive and it was very prone to human error. We had to pull APRs for each one of your projects. Then we had to pull SPM and pull certain query datas. So already we have different data sets that we're looking at, different reports that we're looking at, not the raw data itself. And then we would literally hand place those into a spreadsheet that had a couple of formulas that calculated scores. And the performance outcome sheet contained columns and tabs that had weird calculation errors. So where, we saw a couple of instances where there would be, the numerator would contain households, but then it'd be divided by clients, which would always result in a much lower percentage, or vice versa, which would always result in a percentage that could be over 100%. So there were a lot of issues with that previous performance outcome sheet. And this report, the way we had previously done it, was not able to be run and updated continually. I think y'all are familiar, y'all may recall that that there wasn't a process of updating at multiple points the performance outcomes because of how manual and how time intensive it was to generate all of that information. So what is coming in instead? Why are we here and meeting and talking through needing to change not necessarily change the process, but just change the delivery mechanism of the performance outcomes? So replacing this process are a series of new tools built in HMIS. So just to talk briefly about some of the benefits before we jump into what exactly is being pulled out of these new reports. So any HMIS user is able to review their organization's performance evaluation. This information is updated live with the exception of drawdown, cost effectiveness, and racial equity. And you can change your time frame to review whenever. So if you wanted to see what your performance outcomes would be for, for the first quarter of this year, you can change the time frame to just look directly at that. So we hope that eventually we hope that this report will have wider implications for you and being able to monitor the work that you do with your clients and in your projects in general. So let me address let me go over which criteria we were able to pull into HMIS. So each of these criteria that I have listed here are going to be generated from data in HMIS. This is not going to be data that is we're not pulling it from any other source. It's directly from your enrollment data, from your client's enrollment data. So we're going to be looking at housing, and we can generate housing stability. We can generate the non-employment income, employment income, non-cash benefits, clients that are harder to serve. And I'll make a note that the majority of these are going to be in percentages. Harder to serve is the only one where we actually flat out assign points. Then following that are returns to homelessness, entry-exit timing, and data completeness. And finally, days to housing, priority populations, and health insurance. So all of these data points are data points that we're grabbing from enrollments you've documented in HMIS that are sort of the basic universal data elements and project-specific data elements. So here's a little preview of where it is located. You'll be able to find, so any user in HMIS, as long as they're logging in through the HMIS user workgroup, will be able to see it on their home workspace. So here you can see when I hover over performance monitoring and then click on program evaluation, I have my spreadsheet right there. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the data source. So on the previous iteration of the scoring rubric, the data source that was often quoted as was the COC APR or the SPM. The COC APR being the Continuum of Care annual performance review, and the SPM being the system performance measures. So while this information was in HMIS, right? The APR and the SPMs, all of that are what I call canned reports, meaning that it is not a report that the HMIS lead has generated. It's a report that sort of comes built in from our vendor. And these calculations were not controlled by any one of the HMIS lead people. So when you're exporting your APR, if you've ever had that experience where you have to export your APR, you're not exporting something that the HMIS team at SHIP has developed. It's something that's built in from our vendor that meets very specific specifications and requirements by HUD. And so we couldn't necessarily use that APR. So what we had to do is sort of recreate those APR and SPM calculations. So what we had to do was look at HUD's guidance in regards to the data the calculations that they had provided to our vendor and try to replicate that wherever we could so that we are sticking as close to what the calculations were intended to be when we mentioned the COC APR and the SPM. So let's talk about what kind of clients get pulled into these calculations. So we are going to go through each of these different scoring rubrics, and I'll have a point where we talk about the data source. But for the most part, the general ground, this differs for a couple of criteria, right? So I want to make mention that length of time to housing and let's see what else. Returns to homelessness kind of contain a different set of information, but for the most part, any data that we're generating out of HMIS, it's generating for these program evaluations, performance evaluations. It's pulling from any clients that are enrolled at any point during the reporting period. So depending on what the criteria is, we may then refine that down to, you know, we're only looking at adults, we're only looking at heads of household, we're only looking at XYZ. But the baseline is that we're looking at any clients that were enrolled at any point during the reporting period. And that reporting period is going to be from January 1st, 2020, all the way to December 31st, 2020. Yeah, so this information is that's our baseline, and then we just filter from there. And in terms of when we review data, for the most part, we're looking at data as of the client's program entry, and then data as of the client's program exit, or if they haven't exited, their report end date. So when you see a comparison, you know, if you're wondering a client who came in, entered your program without income, but then they exit with income, we're looking at both of the at that full timeline of the client's life cycle. So just know that it's not only program entry information that we're looking at, it's the client's entire sort of stay in your project. So with that, I want to hop into the scoring rubric because I want to give Gwen enough time to sort of talk through the report itself. So these calculations, I've gone into a little bit more detail than they will be designated in the scoring rubric. This is largely just so we can have it be a little bit more conversational. So the first scoring rubric criteria is housing stability, which looks at the retention rates of clients in PSH or RH housing over time, or if they've exited to permanent housing. So in terms of the calculations, we're including any clients that have a null exit date or that have exited after the report end date. We add that to any clients that have exited to permanent housing. And then we divide that by the total number of clients minus any clients that are excluded from sort of being a ding against the project, right? So these excluded individuals count are folks that are deceased, that exited to foster care, long-term care, that are in institutional situations effectively. All right, so moving on from that, now we go into non-employment income, and this is looking at non-employment income that a client has been able to maintain or increase after staying a year in the project. So again, the data source, the data filtering is going to be any clients that are over the age of 18 upon entry and that have stayed in the project over a year. So some of the newer projects may not have this calculation because you may be totally brand new. You may not have anyone that's been there for over a year. So for those, you will see a blank, but the other providers that have been operating for longer, you will see these clients populate, and just know that our baseline here are clients that are enrolled, that are over the age of 18 as of entry into your project, and that have stayed in the project for over a year. And employment income is much in the same in terms of filtering for those clients that are 18, have been in there for a year. And in the numerator, it's looking to ensure that clients have been able to receive some type of employment income. So anyone that is that has employment income, um, excuse me, that has employment income either at the entry or exit of their report or by the report end date, right? So maybe they didn't start out in your project as having employment income, but midway through there's an update or they get a seasonal job and you're able to document that in HMIS. That would include the client in the numerator. And then the denominator right here are going to be any clients who are sort of our baseline, over 18 and have stayed in the project for a year. Now, mainstream benefits was very close to being similar to employment and non-employment income. But one thing that we had to do was actually the numerator and denominator actually are calculated by households, but to include the household, we're looking, that household has to have someone that is a client that is over the age of 18 at entry, whose length of stay in the project is over 1 year. So that's the baseline, that's the denominator, and then the numerator is going to be anyone that has a one mainstream benefit, either at project entry, exit, or by their report end date. So here we hop into the drawdown rates, and this is the first of the couple of items that we're not calculating out of HMIS. This is not native to HMIS. This is not information that you enter for an enrolled client or for your project. Rather, this is information that we receive from the city, and the drawdown rate will be looking at your last completed contract. So for those of you that may be finishing up your contract on May 31st, we are not actually going to be looking at that particular contract that ends on May 31st. We're going to be looking at last year's contract and compare how much you were able to draw down from that completed contract. So again, the drawdown rate we're looking at is for the last contract year you had. And the quarterly drawdown is, again, information that's provided to us by the city. It's just essentially saying, did you submit a drawdown request or submit a drawdown request throughout the quarters of last year. So here the calculations is that y'all receive 1 point if there was a drawdown once per quarter, and this would be for 2020. Now, coming back into the world of HMIS, we have our harder to serve populations. And so harder to serve operates off of 3 calculations effectively. So we look at clients that have so there are 3 calculations that we have to perform. We're looking at a client's barriers. All of this information is based off of client barriers, and this includes everyone. So it's not just adults or not just folks that have stayed 1+ year. It's for everyone. So we look at the number of clients with at least one condition and divide that by total number of clients. Then we look at number of clients with 2 conditions, then divide that by total number of clients. And then finally, number of clients with 3 or more conditions, divide that by the total number of clients. If either one of those ends up with over 50%, then you get a score distribution from there. So if you have a rate of 50% or more for clients with 3 or more conditions, then you get the full, I believe it's 3 points that go to harder to serve. But again, all this information is drawing from your client's barrier assessment. So this is where the data quality report will really be helpful, because you'll be able to identify which clients do not have a completed barrier assessment or completed disability information. Now, returns to homelessness is a calculation that looks at your project for this reporting period, right? So 2020, all of 2020 calendar year, and it looks back at the clients that were enrolled 2 years ago and sees who has returned to the system since then, if they had exited in the reporting time frame from 2 years ago. So I feel like I'm explaining that wrong. So I want to tap in Gwen to see if she could provide a little bit more insight for all of y'all.
Yeah.
So Gwen, do you have any, if you could just kind of talk a little bit more to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole point of our system, right, is that we're housing folks. So to really assess that, we need to look at, are you housing people? And then when you house them, are they stable? Are they staying in that situation? So we need to look at folks that you housed a while back, because the folks that you housed last week, of course, they're still going to be in their apartment. That's not really helpful to look at. So whatever our reporting period is, we go back 2 years and say, okay, in this same period, these same months 2 years ago, let's look at just the folks that were housed. They exited to a rental, they exited to live with family permanently, anything like that. Of those folks, what percentage of them ended up coming back into our system within 2 years? They came back to coordinated entry. They entered an emergency shelter. Anything where they're coming back and indicating that they are again experiencing homelessness, that situation did not end up being stable for them. That's what we're looking at here. So if you're a newer program, we're not going to know yet because you didn't have any exits 2 years ago. But for those programs that have been around for a longer time, we're going to be looking at those returns. Sally, you're on mute.
Thanks so much, Gwen. I really appreciate that, both the clarity and for telling me I'm on mute. So moving forward, we have HMIS data quality. So HMIS data quality is sort of 3 different criteria. I'll start out with the easy, with timeliness, right? So project entry timeliness, we're essentially taking the average for all clients and looking at their project enrollment minus the enrollment creation date. So all of your information when you input a client is timestamped. So if you were backlogged and you enrolled a client at the beginning of the month on May 1st, you had done an intake for a client at the beginning of the month, May 1st, but didn't enter their information in until today, we are looking at the project start date, which would be May 1st, and looking at the difference of when you actually created the enrollment, which would be May 19th. And then we take that result, that day result, and take the average for all the clients enrolled in your project. And it's the same for exit dates. So if you exited a client, if a client was no longer participating in your project on April 30th, but you didn't input that until today, again, we're looking at the project exit date minus the creation date of that exit. So just another reminder that everything in Client Track is timestamped when it's created, when a record's created or edited. So moving on to the next scoring rubric. Oh, I'm sorry, actually, I should mention. Then we also have completeness. So the completeness metric is interesting. So for the previous process, we were using a report, another one of the series of reports that we had to generate, a report called data quality parentheses old. So it did not contain the most up-to-date data standards. And what we had to do was create our own data quality process. There's a data quality report that Gwen will be showing you, and a data quality summary that you're able to utilize. And the summary is where we're calculating the completeness score for you all. So again, we had to move away from using this outdated report because it was not containing any kind of, it didn't contain the updated data standards. Now, moving on to racial equity, this is looking at total staff and board members of color over the total staff. This is not information that we collect in HMIS, and this would be provided to us through self-report. I'm going to be following up with the performance outcomes committee and the NOFA competition folks to see how we want to potentially standardize this. But again, this is not this is all self-reported. We don't collect this kind of information in HMIS for your users, so this is what it is, and we take your essentially your self-report from this, and I'll have more information in terms of how you'll be able to self-report in a follow-up email, because right now we don't necessarily have a form dedicated for this. It may be something that we have to develop, but again, I have to talk through this with the performance evaluation and outcomes team. Now we look at the length of time for housing, and very similar to how we calculate timeliness, we're looking at the referral date for a particular head of household, and then comparing the difference to their housing move-in date, and then just taking the average for all your heads of household. So that's who is sourced for this. It's any client that is a head of household that has received a referral and has a housing move-in date. So through those three criteria, designate who's included in this calculation. And again, it's really just to see how quickly we're able to house people. For the scoring of priority population, what we are doing is that we're flagging any households that contain a youth, that are youth-led, that contain someone that is chronically homeless, that is a veteran, that is fleeing domestic violence, or households that are just families, and then dividing that by your project's total number of households. So if you have five households that contain one veteran, that would include them in the numerator. That would mean that they are a priority population if they just contain one person that meets one of these different priority populations. Oh, and I'm sorry, this is actually supposed to read cost effectiveness, but cost effectiveness, again, it's the total grant awarded divided by minus administrative budget over the clients who remain in the project or exit to permanent housing. The calculation for the funds is not inherent to HMIS, but the denominator of clients who remain in the project or exit to permanent housing, that's something that we will be generating from HMIS, but the other costs, the budgetary information, that's not from us. And then finally, health insurance. So health insurance is looking to see if every client in your program has health insurance. It just has it, and this is for everyone. So there's no indication that it's just for adults or just for heads of household. This is children, everyone, and everyone to get the point for this particular criteria. 100% of the client pool has to have health insurance. So just a thing to think through. So this kind of wraps up the scoring rubric section. What I'll say is that there are new efforts to look into how we're going to structure the tool, structure the scoring rubric going forward. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. But we're going to move along, and we can save that for a conversation later in our meeting. So I've talked about the scoring rubric. I've talked about the process. Now we're going to get into the actual review of what this looks like. So running the performance evaluation report, it's available to anyone that is an HMIS user in the HMIS user work group, and everyone in our system has access to the HMIS user work group. and it's in the home workspace. So you have to be under home to be able to access these tools. And you would just hover over monitoring and click on program evaluation. But Gwen will be showing you live what this looks like. You'll have this prompt here. The time range that we're looking at is January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. The filter by, none allows you to see every project that is being scored. Program type gives you the options to sort by not sort, but process for only rapid rehousing projects or permanent supportive housing projects. And then program, this is probably the quickest option too, because Gwen will get into some issues with running it. Program is just indicating solely one program of yours. So one thing I want to mention is that this is the first iteration of our report. Our team is relatively new to client track. We just started to receive designer rights and true administrative rights to alter different features of client track this past April. So we are still in the process of working out kinks of finding different mechanisms that can make reports run quicker or make reports run more effectively and efficiently. But as of right now, you'll notice that the report might run a little slow. So we ask that you just please be patient as you go through it. You may have to click search multiple times. The report may say there was a problem loading the report. You would just have to click search again because the report will start loading and maybe it stops right here. But if you just click search one more time, it'll keep going until it eventually gets to a completed state. So this is something that is priority to us. We're working with our vendor to try to resolve this and hopefully make it just a lot easier to jump into and less of a pain to, well, it's not a pain to run. It's actually very easy to run, but more consistent in terms of the speed in which it's able to be run. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gwen. Gwen, you want to take it on?
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Real quick, before I share my screen, I got a question about the performance outcomes and evaluation team. Is that just the folks that are developing the rubric? You mentioned that.
So it's a non-conflicted group. We're working through the rubric, and I believe that this will start in June, from my understanding. So I hope to have more information, and I'll send that information out tomorrow to this group that joined.
Fantastic. Go ahead and share my screen. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. Sorry, I'm trying to share just the window. Here we go. So we're in the training site. Nothing we're looking at is real data. This is all fake data. Don't worry about any numbers you see here. This is just demonstrating the functionality. So when you log in, you're on your home page. You're going to come into My Client Track, and down here at the bottom, we've got this new Performance Monitoring tab. For this, we're going to look at Program Evaluation. This has everything on everything that's included in HMIS except the data quality, which is on its own little tab, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. You can choose to filter by nothing, which will show you every PSH and rapid rehousing program. I don't recommend this. It's going to take a really long time to run. Do program type, and then you can pick just one of those program types, or what you'll probably want to do is run it just for your individual program. I'm logged in as CHIP right now, which is why I'm seeing this list, but your program name list is going to reflect whatever you have access to. And again, this is all fake data. Let's go ahead and look at HVAF. This date range at the top, like Sal said, this is letting you set your reporting period. It's going to default to today. That's so if you're monitoring whether folks have health insurance, what you're scoring on income, just those things that you can change with folks that are currently in program and just stay on top of that. That's telling you right now, the folks that are in program today, how are you scoring on them? So let's just go ahead and run this for today. And it'll take a bit. We are pulling in all of that information we talked about, this enrollment information for the clients that are in right now, disabling conditions, insurance. We're pulling in exit destinations from 2 years ago. So there's a ton going on here, but we're just gonna hit run until it goes through. So don't worry if it's taking a while, that's fine. It's just the way it is. We will continue to optimize this. The problem submitting the form just means it timed out. It's not like an error with the form.
And I'm actually glad that we were able to demonstrate that and actually show that it's okay that that's going to occur.
Yeah, it looks alarming. Don't worry, just hit search. So here we go. We've got our one HVAF rapid rehousing program right here. And then we've got these metrics displayed across the top. So we have housing stability metric, non-employment income, employment income, non-cash benefits. Just a flag here. These ones are only looking at adults or folks who were adults when they entered program that have been in for at least a year. You have to be an adult when you enter program because say you enroll a family in PSH, they've got a 17-year-old turns 18. I'm not going to ding you if that 18-year-old isn't immediately working. So just adults at entry. And then newer programs, you're not going to have anyone that's been enrolled for 365 days yet. You just haven't been around that long. So you'll see blanks here, nothing to worry about. Just don't have anyone in that measure yet. Harder to serve points. This is the only one that is displayed as the actual point score rather than the percentage. Returns to homelessness. This is the same thing. If you just see a % sign here, it just means you don't have anyone to look at for that measure yet. And that's because we're going back 2 years here, right? So even though in this fake 2019 program, we do have folks that have been around for 2 years, there isn't anyone that exited to housing 2 years ago for me to look at and see if they returned. Days to house, this is just looking at folks that moved in during that period. So they have to have moved in during that period and have a CES referral preceding it. So both of those pieces have to be there for me to calculate that number. Priority populations, % of households you're working with that are on the priority list, and the % of folks in your program that have health insurance. I don't see the chat for this call. Do we have any? Oh no,
there haven't been any so far, Gwen. I'm taking a look.
Thanks, so. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at data quality since that's the only one that's not here. I tried putting it on here and oh man, you think this is slow now? When it was trying to run data quality too, it was not going to work. So our scoring is right here, data quality summary. So we've got 3 levels here. We're going to go into data quality summary, and once again, the date range, that's looking at folks that are active in that period. So this is going to show this for folks that are currently active in this program. So let's say coordinated entry, I want to see that. It's just going to tell me how many enrollments are there. So how many folks do I have currently active in this program? And of those, what % of required elements are complete? So you come here, you see 78%. Okay, that's kind of helpful. I know that I'm missing some things, but to know exactly what to fix, you're going to come back in here into detail, this little life preserver, and you're going to click on it. And you're going to say, all right, I want to see that program that I just looked at in the summary. Go ahead and show me the data elements for that. If this is new to you, if you haven't used this page before, just know that you can click on this little triangle here and it's going to tell you exactly what we're looking at in each column. It'll just expand. This will make more sense once it loads and you can see what we're looking at below. But just know that there's additional information if you click on this triangle. This is showing for all the required data elements, which ones are present and complete. And that's going to vary, right? Like we need different information from a head of household's child than we would need from a head of household or from an adult partner from a child. It's going to depend on age, whether they're an adult or a child, and whether or not they're head of household. We need different elements. That is included in your scoring. So if you're not If a data element is not required for a given person, you're not going to get dinged on your percentage for not having it. So the idea here is that it's showing you exactly which data elements you need to correct, and it's going to make it really easy for you to jump to that person and add the information. One thing that can speed it up, especially for case managers, if you're trying to make sure that you've got all your information in, is only show my clients checkbox. That's only going to show clients in this program where you created their enrollment. So say you've got maybe a program that's got 5 different case managers working on it, you need to get it cleaned up. You could just have each one of them come in here and run it on their own client. Usually this only takes 2 or 3 times to run. My computer is being really slow today, so I really appreciate your patience. You haven't seen it yet, so okay, here we go. I still like it.
I like how you were trying to set expectations a little bit going, you haven't seen it yet, but it is life-changing and it is awesome.
Thank you. You're too kind. So you've got all of our clients. Clients that are in a household together are going to be grouped. That's what these little white lines are. They're just dividing your households up. It's like these folks are in a household together. So you come through and it has all the elements that we're looking at. If it's required, you're going to have a green check or a red X. See, green check, red X. And if you don't need it, it's going to be a dash. So like veteran status, this person's a child. They were 1 when they entered, so we don't need to know if they're a veteran. If you're a 1-year-old, know that you haven't gone to basic. And then over here, just to kind of make it easier to navigate through here. Sorry, I keep looking off to the side. That's where your squares are. But this little menu here is going to let you jump directly to where that information needs to be corrected. So like this person right on top, they have all their information in, you only have checkboxes. So if I click on it, it's going to say, hey, there's no available options. I don't know what you want to do here. This is fine. But if I come down here where we do have things to fix, I need to check the social security number quality. I need to add in whether they have a disabling condition. If I click on this, it's going to give me the options to jump to those assessments. So I can go ahead and I can click on demographics. I'm not going to click on this because I think this one might have some client data in it. But if you click on this, it'll jump you to their demographic page, or it'll jump you to their enrollment page where you can just go ahead and fix that information right in the system. And then jump back here and make sure that you have a green check mark there and that it's showing up as corrected. So hopefully that'll make data completeness feel more transparent and easier to fix. This really is something that you can control. You can fix this. You can get all this information added in. A question in the chat. Navigation-wise, does this indicate that the missing info began with entry or indicates that there was missing info during the year entered in the annual? That's a great question. This is just looking at the enrollment information. So as long as you collected it at the enrollment, that's going to be fine. We're not checking right now whether there was an annual completed or not. Okay, so all of these elements are added up. This is where that data completeness percentage comes from in this flyout here. Let's see. One thing we want to have ready for next quarter is like how we have here, we have this detail page that shows for each person what's going into that percentage score. I want to have that for the performance evaluation overall. So you'll be able to click on a little flyout and see, okay, which of my clients don't have health insurance and narrow in on that. That is coming. We just didn't have it done in time for this round. I think that's everything I have to share on program evaluation. Sal, is there anything you'd like me to talk more about, or do you feel like we covered it okay?
So I just want to mention to folks that this is not only for data quality, right? You may not, like, if you realize that there's a missing data response for veteran status, that could be that could count that client as a priority population. That would help improve your overall evaluation. So this data quality report is critical. It's not just for that individual criteria of data quality. It impacts your entire evaluation. The more accurate information, the more complete information you have in there, in all likelihood, the better your total evaluation outcomes will be. So it's really critical, folks, and it's super helpful. And I really appreciate Gwen's ability to be able to craft something like that.
We have a hand up. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Sean?
Yeah, thank you. I've been following along with you all. So first off, thank you so much for this. I think we've all been complaining for the past maybe 4 years to get this back. So thank you for the work you put in for it. I'm following along also with just like my program. So I have a program for my COC that began as early as 2012. I can tell you right now that if I load 2012 to the date range of now, I've most likely on that program served at least up to 95, if not almost 100 individuals, with those entering as well as exiting. But right now, I only show that 41 results have been found. Do we know if we're still like updating all of the programs and making sure that this pulls all of the correct data? I guess I'm just wondering if I'm doing something wrong or if there's something we're still waiting for, like this system to completely be at 100.
When you say you're seeing 44, what page are you on? What are your parameters?
So I just did Indy data quality. So I went to your data quality. I went to data quality detail. I then put my date range as of the start of my contract, which would have been 7/1/2012 to 5/19/2021. And all it shows is 41 results found. And that includes people who've been enrolled and those who've exited. Now, I don't have my big monitor, so I'm not sure if like there's multiple pages and I'm just not seeing the page that I should, but it only says that it's pulled 41 individuals.
Did you click the checkbox that says show just my clients?
That is correct. Yes, I have.
It should be showing everyone. It's looking at the field user creating. Did you create all of them, or is there anybody else that does?
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely not the only person who's worked at mine since 2012. So it only lists whom you've created.
We can change that. If I'm hearing that it would be more helpful to look at, I don't know who the case manager assigned to the cases, we can absolutely change that in our next thing.
Yeah, if that could be a conversation. I can't obviously speak generally, but I'm the one who handles reporting. So if I don't have access to everything, then he's not going to be helpful.
Okay.
Pretty please.
Yep. What I might do, I'm thinking out loud here. What I might do is have like an option like show ones that I created or show ones that I'm the case manager for, and then you could check both boxes or neither, just so then we have everything covered.
Absolutely. I think that would be the most useful for everybody, just because there's going to be people who've left other companies that, they didn't do the entry, but obviously the entry has an issue. Obviously now, you would be the case manager to put in the entry, but that's not how our programs or how we're set up there. So we have the case manager put in the entry and then I just double check their work. So going back, I may need access to making sure I know that anything was entered wrong.
All right, you got it. Our syncs happen monthly. We just had one, so it'll probably be a couple weeks, but you will see that in the system.
Thank you.
And for clarification, I don't know if folks know this concept, but when we say sync, any changes that we speaking the lingo, Gwen, any sort of administrative changes, programming changes, reporting changes that we make into the system, we have to coordinate with our vendor so that they bring it over from our staging site, which is the training site, and then put it into the production site, which is the live site, the one that y'all log into every day. So you have already been seeing a lot of that information. And we've already gone through a couple of syncs. You might have seen some new information, new reports, new options in the sidebar. And like Gwen had mentioned, we typically have syncs at the top of every month. For this process, we're negotiating with, I think we want to try to respond to your issues as quickly as we can. So, we're hoping for one. If we need one, we can arrange for it with relative with a couple of days notice, and we'll give notice to the community to let y'all know if there's going to be any fixes or changes that occur. But that's when we talk about syncs, it's sort of the big change that'll be occurring in the system. Now, are there any other questions relating to, do you want to see more of a review? Any other questions related to the data quality, performance outcomes as it appears in HMIS? So, I want to move back to just sort of wrapping up our slide, and then we'll hop into further questions. Let me go from. All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about, just as a review, some of the things to keep in mind. And I also want to mention for some of the special project types, particularly victim service providers, what we're going to be doing with your data. So in terms of things to keep in mind, remember this tool is still being refined, it's still being worked on, it's still being improved, and don't feel disheartened if it doesn't load the first time. Just keep clicking search. We ask for your patience in that regard. It's really helpful once you actually do have it up, and it almost always loads. You just have to give it enough time to have it come through. And for clarification, anyone that has access to HMIS will have access to the latest performance evaluation data. They will always have access to it. They're not going to see it. You all aren't going to see it in scores. You're going to see percentages, because we feel like that's the most actionable piece of information you could see. But for the scores and for the drawdown information, the rounds that we talked about being posted tomorrow on Thursday, May 20th, on June 1st and June 14th will include scores and will include the drawdown information. And the drawdown information is static. We're just taking the information provided to us in regards to contracts and calculating that, and that really won't change because those contracts are already ended. So again, you do not have to be an HMIS user. Your bosses or your colleagues that are not in HMIS but still want to review this information, should still know this information, will have access to a spreadsheet that they can utilize. So there are no worries about that. And in regards to domestic violence providers and victim service providers, we're going to be coordinating with you all to grab your information from your individual projects. So everyone knows, victim service providers are actually required to input information into a separate system that is not HMIS. So we'll be following up with them to retrieve that information and try to replicate essentially the same calculations we're doing for these clients for all of your projects, all the COC, PSH, RH projects, and replicate them for their particular data sets. And as a result, their data sets will be a little slower to update. And they will be adhering to rounds. There won't be live information that they'll be able to review if you are a victim service provider. And in terms of talking through what's next, like Gwen had mentioned, we have a couple of wish list items that we wanted to be able to get to. So we want to expand this report. Right now, the report only will be showing you PSH and RH project types. The columns are really only relevant to those particular project types. But for the next quarter, we want to start capturing ESG projects as well. So that means any projects that are emergency shelters, safe haven, transitional housing, street outreach services only. We want to expand the scope of this performance evaluation reporting toolkit to apply to those. And based on the project type, we'll show you different columns, but it's more of a monitoring tool. It won't, if you're an ESG funded project, there's not really an equivalent of this NOFA evaluation. So it, my understanding is that it is not currently weighted in any way, but it's good to keep track of it to understand that this is part of your, that this is ultimately helping you improve your data and helping you improve your outcomes overall. So in terms of user interface, we're going to be making some changes to the user interface. We want to work on the accessibility of the data, of how you can drill down for certain information, like Gwen had mentioned, like if you wanted to see how many of your clients are considered harder to serve, ideally you'd be able to just sort of generate a list of those people. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working throughout the next couple of quarters. This is something that we were really excited to be able to generate, and we're really excited to be able to improve on it. So any feedback that y'all may have of different options that you may potentially want, or that would be helpful for you to better understand your data, or to have better better analysis of your data, let us know. We're open to feedback. We're open to seeing what would be most helpful for everyone. And so in terms of resources, this link will be sent out to everyone. We are going to host office hours on the last week of May. So we'll also open up office hours as it occurs. That'll be scheduled through 30-minute blocks on Calendly. And we'd be happy to talk with y'all, to meet with y'all, to talk through your issues. As always, one thing I want to mention is that the help desk is going to be the best point of contact for this. It's a queue. It doesn't get lost in anyone's email. And it's our way of being able to kind of determine what articles we need to create, what kind of, it gives us more data than we wouldn't have if we were just sort of going off of anecdotal emails that everyone's been receiving. So please use the help desk whenever you can. And this video is being recorded. This meeting is being recorded. We're going to go ahead and post that up to YouTube, provide different timestamps of when, we're going to provide timestamps so that you can skip through any particular elements that you want to review one more time. And all that information will be sent out to you tomorrow when we are able to generate the first round of results and send that out to the general community. So with that having been said, are there any questions right now? I'd like to open it up to folks. I know we have about, a little over 40 minutes left. One thing I will also mention is that this group of people, HMIS is going to start having a monthly check-in. So we're going to sort of do a HMIS fireside chat, just talking through what is going into a sync, any updates that had occurred, have it be an open forum to address any issues that you may be encountering, that you feel comfortable potentially troubleshooting, to just to give you, just to sort of cross-train everyone and show different approaches. So y'all are already on we'll be on the mailing list for that. We're planning on having it at the beginning of every month, and I will be determining what day that is, what day that falls on. But we'll send out the invite to everyone once we do. So Randy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Randy, do you want to go ahead and talk?
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I thought you said you were going to unmute it. Okay, I was waiting on you. So as Gwen was kind of doing that step by step, I kind of went through. I'm a hands-on person, so I just kind of wanted to go through it. So I did the data quality detail. I'm sure I always say the only dumb question's the one not asked. So I'm sure somebody may encounter this as well. On the kind of looking at the check marks and then the dashes and things of that nature, on our grant that we allow families and children, we have there's one that specific popped up is that the son is 18 years old. And so it's showing X's on the disabling condition, prior living situation, and living situation. So I'm assuming that those were not needed at enrollment because the family's been in the household for a while. Would I mean, obviously that would bring down my overall data quality percentage. Do I need to re-enroll that person, or what would that look like?
So I think if you could, when you click on the drop down, are you able to see their individual information? We could potentially, well, the client was not 18 at the moment of enrollment, right?
Correct.
Okay. I think that client may need an update if you can potentially do it, but Gwen, just so we understand the data quality report, it is pulling all adults, right? No matter if they were, whether or not they were adults at entry, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm trying to verify disabling condition right now. Most values that are required for adults, HUD asks that you update them when a child ages into adulthood.
Oh, okay.
That's why I chose to do it that way.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the HUD data standard does indicate that.
No
Not
worries.
unfortunate, but
Oh, HUD.
are there any other questions? So once we develop this additional hour, we can also dedicate a significant portion to just kind of following up with any, any issues that y'all have encountered from this process. And of course, we have our office hours that we'll be hosting. And what I'd recommend is that when you are engaging in the office hour, if you could also create a ticket beforehand so that we are able to reference it. So folks, if there's no other concern or issue, feel free to, email the help desk, email Gwen, Chris, or myself, and we can provide you with anything that you need. But, we are really excited at being able to move forward with this new tool set. With Client Track really goes deep. It's a very powerful system, but for all that power also comes a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of ripples across the system when we make changes. And so we are, we're going to be improving this system as we go forward, and we're going to be streamlining it and making changes. But we also are very mindful that one change here can affect another outcome there. So this is a learning process for our team, and we are taking it in a very methodical and cautious way forward, while also trying to generate just a bunch of cool stuff for you all that you can actually act on. So if there are other things that you think in general would help your organization, you all are the end users. If there's a report or some type of information that you think could be structured that would help you out a lot, let us know. Just shoot us an email saying like, I sure wish we had a list of clients that showed this or something of that sort, and we can see what we can do in terms of implementing that into the system. So with that having been said, I think we are good to go. Everyone can have their 37 minutes back. And thank you all for joining me. If there are no other concerns, no other questions, be on the lookout for an email tomorrow with the first round results and some more resources and information that you can pull. And with that having been said, last chance for any questions, last chance to take yourself off of mute and ask a question. I see some people leaving already. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time, and have a great day, everyone.